It's probably bad because when you close the browser, it closes it, right? So if somebody's talking to you on a phone and they've got Skype and the
Yeah,
thing going,
exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
Let's
So
see.
fewer
Okay.
headaches.
So it looks like
Oh, I
we
see it.
are live. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Filmmaker chat. And if you haven't seen Filmmaker chats before, I'm just letting you know that this is a thing that I actually originally decided to do for Patreon, but because of the pandemic, I decided that I would stream them here for all of you. And then if you still want access, if you ever want to rewatch one or you missed one or whatever, you can sign up on Patreon to support me for $10 a month and get the archive of all of my Filmmaker chats. And there's about, I think there's like 12 or more now. So there's a lot of them. I have writers, producers, directors, actors. We talk about film color theory and film theory in general. There's ones where I interview one of my friends who's been very successful with film festival stuff. So there's tons of information there in the archive that you can always watch on Patreon. And you can get to that with the link in the description below. But today, I am joined by Scott Dion Brown, who is a director and actor. And I hope I said your middle name right. I should have
Yes.
checked
Yes, you did.
beforehand. Okay, good. And he is an actor director. We just met recently because your film Storage Room B was also at Gen Con. And it was such a pleasure. I got to host one of the panels and ask you questions about the film. And I'm excited to do that again today. But basically, Storage Room B is a single angle zombie film that is just so good. And it's not out yet, unfortunately. I can't wait till it's out, but I have seen it because I'm privileged. No, I'm just kidding. um,
Correct.
and I'm excited to talk about it. But you're also an actor and a YouTuber, which is very cool. And you have your own channel. There's a link to Scott's channel in the description below where you do all sorts of stuff. You stream video games. You also do. You did a cover of a Mulan song, which was really great. All sorts of
Yep.
fun videos. Do you want to pitch your YouTube channel?
Yeah, you can find me at youtube.com/Scott Dion Brown. And yeah, there's music, vlogs, lots of I've been doing a lot of live streaming since the pandemic started, so that's a big part
Nice.
of it. Little video game stuff and there's a bunch of videos on there. There's unboxing videos. It's kind of just whatever I feel like doing. But
Nice. Yeah.
it's all,
And
just
I
a
should
lot of fun.
say, this is thank you, Scott. Again, those of you who have seen my previous streams know how much of a dumpster fire they can be sometimes. Scott has helped me figure out all of my problems. So please let us know in the chat if everything sounds and looks good. It should all be good because Scott actually spent last night helping me set everything up. So hopefully for the future, all the streams are going to be so much better. And if they're not, we can just blame Scott. It's Scott's fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on me, guys. I'm sorry.
But welcome. I see we have 2 people watching now. Thank you so much. And don't forget that if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And thank you so much for watching, but we'd love to answer your questions too. So let's start off with talking about Storage Room B, and then we can get into like some general directing questions. But why don't you first tell people about Storage Room B and what inspired it?
Cool. Yeah, Storage Room B, it's a short film. Um, I've been saying that it's a horror short because it involves zombies. Although even as I was making it, I'm not sure if it actually is. I don't know if it's that
Mm,
scary, which is fine. Like it wasn't intended that way, but I wasn't sure what other category it fits under. But
yeah.
it's a short film anyway. It's about
Psychological
two.
thriller, maybe?
Yeah, it can fit
Yeah.
in there. I mean, then there's some elements of humor in there as well. I don't know. I find in general I don't dwell too much on the genre. I'll let other people tell me what genre it is, but it's a short film about two coworkers who find themselves trapped in a storage room. I guess specifically storage room B, um, while a zombie apocalypse breaks out around them. So that's the story, I guess, the general gist of the film itself. And I guess what's sort of unique about it is a single angle
Mm-hmm.
film. So the camera sits in one position for the entire movie. and the actors move around the room, and the only kind of editing that occurs is cuts to show that time has passed. But other than that, it's yeah, the camera never moves.
Yeah. And it's really, you would think that that would get boring, and you did an amazing job at making it interesting and keeping it interesting the entire time. So I'm very excited to talk about it. And one thing that I wanted to talk about specifically was the single angle of the film. And
Mhm.
it's not only just an angle, you also chose like a Dutch angle. And I feel like so often, you see Dutch angles in films, but this one, it just felt so right. So can you talk about your inspiration and thought process behind doing the Dutch angle for the single angle?
Yeah, I mean, one thing about this film, I wish I could say that like, oh yeah, I was going for something, and I guess in my mind, maybe subconsciously I was, but the truth is the angle that I had to pick. So one thing that I wanted to make sure of, so the entire film takes place from one angle, and but I've got a lot of things that happen throughout as they're in there. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something that might be placed in one corner, and there's something that's placed in another part of the room. And so what I had to do was choose an angle that would fit all of the elements in there. And like again, no spoiling anything, but like there are some things that are happen like very low on the screen. There are some things that happened high up on a shelf. There are some things. And so because of that, it was a matter of choosing an angle where everything fit.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't really my plan in terms of tilting the camera on a diagonal outright. But what I did find was there's also a lot of depth from people when they interact at the back of the room to when they're very close to the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I found in order to get stuff that would fit into the frame, um, that was high up as well as down low, the camera was getting pretty far away from the back of the room. And so what I ended up actually having to do was I found that if I tilted the camera, I could fit the things in the top of the screen and in the bottom,
Oh.
and then kind of work on a diagonal. So it was more just sort of technical because I
Mm.
found like when the film starts, they come into the room and they're against the door, which is at the very furthest away from the camera, and I didn't want them to look so small. So it was kind of a challenge finding an angle that would work for every scene in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
In one way, it's really cool because you're only setting up the camera once and you're setting up the lighting once.
Yeah.
But because of that, you really have to be very selective of which one you choose. So that's kind of how I ended up at the angle that we're at, which happened to
Wow.
be a Dutch angle.
Yeah. No, it was great. I mean, I think it was well fitting for the film as well. So, and how did you brought up something that I didn't even really think about, but like how did you manage to keep everything in focus? Did you have a cameraman who was like racking the whole time, or did you have a pretty wide depth of field?
Uh, I was also the cameraman,
Gotcha.
and originally I was playing with the idea of making the entire room in focus for the whole time.
Mm.
And I tried that when we were first setting up, like because we can only be in the location for the 2 days that we were there. So I had to plan it where we kind of had to get into the room, set everything up, and then basically just shoot on that day. But I planned the first few hours where I was just experimenting with those details.
Mm-hmm.
And I found because of the setup, when I initially set it up so that the entire room was in focus, we had some weird looking optical illusions where somebody who was further from the camera and if somebody else was close, they just looked like it almost looked like how they filmed Lord of the Rings. Like
Yeah.
the person closer to the camera actually looked larger and it looked a little bizarre.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was um, bringing it down a little bit, and then yeah, I did just sort of have to
Wow.
you know adjust this focus as we went along.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean it looks great. Like I didn't even I never thought while I was watching it like, oh, this is out of focus or this isn't. And it wasn't till I was thinking about questions for you that I was like, oh yeah, that blows my mind. Like, how did you keep everything in focus? Because it does move around. That's amazing. Did you have like a monitor for your camera? Or you?
No, the camera we shot on
Wow.
it. Which one was it?
Yeah. What did you shoot on?
It was a Black Magic.
Ooh,
What's it called?
the pocket or the
Yeah, no, no, no. It wasn't the Pocket. It was the larger one. I
the
rented it. It was the
Ursa? Is that it?
Yes, I think it was the
Yeah.
Ursa. Yes. So that one's got a viewfinder on it.
Oh, Okay.
And so, and the thing is, the camera angle that we chose, it's like on the ground, like
Mm-hmm.
it was on like a very very low tripod. In fact, what I can't remember exactly how I did it now. It might have been on a tripod that was folded up and laying flat on its side, and then
Oh, wow.
so that was the angle. Yeah, so I basically spent the whole filming basically sort of crouched in a little ball on the floor
Oh my
while we shot
gosh.
it. Yeah, yeah,
That sounds like it's brutal for your knees.
yeah. It was a bit tough, and on the back it wasn't so good
Ugh.
but it was only
Yeah.
2 days of shooting, so it was okay.
That's nice.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, similarly to picking a single camera angle, I'm curious what the budget of your film was and if that was sort of part of your decision making process with just doing one angle, because that probably allowed you so much more time and also made it a cheaper production, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helped with that. It wasn't really budget that had me come up with the single angle. Um, the idea for the single angle kind of came first.
Mm.
And I'm not really sure why or where it came from, but I just remember one day, a lot of my ideas come if I'm in the shower. But I was just, I remember I was like in the shower and I just kind of was imagining just this idea, like if the camera never moved and I was, I don't know, I've got a pretty, I don't know, visual mind. So like
Hmm.
I can kind of see the pictures pretty clearly. So like I was just sort of watching it in my mind a little bit and I'm just sort of imagining it. And particularly there was one of the scenes towards the end, which is one of the first, which is when a lot of crazy things start to happen. That was one of the first things that I thought of. And
Mm.
I just thought the concept was cool. And yeah, so it definitely made things easier in that I could keep the crew quite small
Mm.
because the camera's never moving. So I was basically the crew,
Oh, wow.
although some of the other cast members doubled as crew members as well, so that helped. They were my friends as well.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so that helped with things. But it did make it simpler in that yeah, like you place the camera once, I placed the lighting once, so I didn't have to have like a separate lighting person who was like lighting. Like I was basically able to kind of place everything, set it all up, and then the only thing I really was had somebody monitoring the whole time was sound because
Oh, nice.
that was fairly people moving around a lot. So
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I want to come back to the sound because now that you mentioned that, I'm curious to know about that. But going back to the lighting, that must have been a challenge lighting the film so that, I mean, people move all over. They get close to the camera, they're far away from the camera, they're in the middle of the frame, they're at the edge of the left and right frame. So how did you light to accommodate that?
that was the way I was lighting it, and that's exactly. I had this mini almost. There's this not a panic attack, but there was definitely this moment of like because I'm standing here in this room and I know that the lighting I'm about to choose right now, if I decide halfway through this day or tomorrow that I want to change something, I can't because the whole point is that
Right.
they're in this one room and nothing's changed and I didn't want anything to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically the way I imagined it is I knew that there were some scenes where they were going to be sitting very close to the camera. So for there I put kind of just a general sort of softish light that would kind of cover that whole area.
Mm-hmm.
And then further away, I put a more harsh looking sort of angled light because I figured further away from the camera, you're not going to see the details as much anyway. So I'll use that area to create kind of the atmosphere with some shadows and like I cast some really harsh shadows through some shelves, so you got some like nice lines shining across the back.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I settled on it. And then after however long I spent tweaking things, I finally was just like, this looks fine, and I just sort of had to go with it. But it was basically a matter of placing the lights. I hit record on the camera and I kind of walked around in the space
Mm-hmm.
and sort of went, okay, well, I can kind of see everything that I'm doing here. Um, it was also at that moment when I kind of realized, okay, if they stand because the camel was on an angle, I had to realize, okay, if somebody walks over to the right and they're closer to the camera, we lose their head. So if I want somebody
Oh.
to be standing straight up, they have to stay to the left. So I was able to then give my actors direction, being like, because I encouraged them to move around for some scenes, not necessarily directing them to see where they would go, but I just told them to be like, okay, if you walk past this point, we lose your head. If you
Mm-hmm.
walk past, so make sure if you're going over here, you kneel or this is where you grab a seat.
Oh,
And so it
interesting.
was, yeah,
So you spent a
it
lot of time on blocking then, I'm guessing.
yeah. I mean, yes, and a lot of blocking, but mainly even less so blocking, more just letting them know their limits.
Mm.
Um, and then because there was sort of not completely improvisational, but I did allow them to improvise a little bit. So the idea of the film is they do get trapped in this room, and they're there for a very long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought
Days
it would be
maybe
interesting.
even.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I purposely kind of don't mention how long they're in there because I don't really know how long it would take. Like, how long could a person survive? Like, I did some general research. Like, I think
Mm.
if you have water, you can survive like 30 days without food. I think
Oh
that's what they
wow.
said, something like that.
Yeah.
Might even be long. I think it's, I don't remember. But I remember I did some brief Googling. But then I also don't know, like, obviously there's a certain point when, like, you probably start to feel a little bit wonky and like stuff like that. But I'm not sure the exact amount of time, but I figured it's the amount of time that's necessary for them to like be in pretty rough shape.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so yeah, so I spent a lot of time, less time blocking so much as just getting them comfortable with where they can move. And then the
Mm-hmm.
only thing I wanted to be aware of is I wanted to make sure that there wasn't much of, if one person's standing here, you don't want somebody standing in front of them. So I had them to sort of naturally make sure. In a lot of ways, it was almost like directing theater, which is what I kind of imagined.
Yeah.
I wanted the atmosphere for the audience to almost feel like you're in the room with them.
Yeah. Spectator. You're
Yeah.
a spectator on the event.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I figure. So if the camera never moves, it almost feels like you almost forget that, you know, like the walls almost start to feel like you're just in a room. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that was the idea. That was
Yeah,
the idea.
totally. So you mentioned audio before, and I'm guessing were they laved, or did you do boot? So they were laved. Okay, because they're
Yeah,
moving
we
around so much.
exactly, and we couldn't. I mean, a boom might have helped. Like, I guess I would have had to have somebody. But the thing is, because of all the areas they're going around the room, and sometimes they're really far, and the ceiling was
Yeah.
quite high, and the angle, it was hard to find a specific location. What I did have kind of as a backup is I did have a little Zoom recorder with a mic
Mm.
that if they were doing a scene that was fairly upstage, I'm using theater terms, but if they were further away, I would like go place the Zoom mic kind of either behind something, or so I'd kind of have it there. But I found the lav mics were my main source.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I mean, that just goes to show I always like to say always have a backup audio at least, just in
Mhm.
case. But yeah, that's awesome. And I imagine like if you had a boom, it would probably cast some terrible shadows that you would see in
Yeah,
frame or whatever. It'd be quite a challenge.
yeah,
Um, so the film doesn't 100% play in real time. Well, it not even a small percent because there are, it's multiple days.
yeah.
But it uses jump cuts, and I feel like so often people don't use jump cuts well, and I felt like you use them super effectively to pass time and also like show emotions of the characters and even in some points like create comedy, which I thought was really great. So, can you talk about that, like your choices for using jump cuts? Was that intended initially all along?
Yeah, I imagined I liked the idea of um, jump cuts, especially to uh, either like finish a joke or like make something funny. Like, I like that idea of like, I don't know, like in, you know, say It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, when someone's
Mm-hmm.
like, "We're never gonna do that," and then the next shot is them doing it.
Yeah.
Like I kind of I like that idea, and I actually did worry about it a little bit because when I first was coming up with the idea of the movie and I wrote it with the jump cuts in mind, but
Mm-hmm.
I was always worried that if the way that I saw it in my mind would translate. And it wasn't really until I got into editing, because like at the time I even wondered, like, would it make sense for me to add, like, should there be like maybe a sound or something when I jump? Like, would I
Oh.
need something like
Mm-hmm.
that? Or and so I thought I wasn't sure if it would necessarily work, but what I found was, I mean, I guess it's probably true with any editing, even when it's just like a more straightforward type thing. But I found that there was just trying almost to find a rhythm to the way you cut the scene. So it's not it's not musical, but it's kind of if I imagine how the scenes feel going into the other, so
Mm.
that they almost you almost have like a flow. That's kind of how I went with it. And
Yeah.
it was definitely the most time consuming part. Like editing by far was the longest part of the whole process, just because um, it was also a tough thing of knowing what to leave out. Like there's tons of lines, and even of like written lines, not just improvised stuff, but written lines that never made it into the film.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, just because I know I found like you hinted at the beginning is like you would think not one camera angle is like it can very easily get boring, and
Mm-hmm.
that was what I was very concerned about. um and so I wanted to make sure it was tough filming them because like so there's a part in the beginning when they pull some heavy things off a shelf, right? And when we shot it, I just said, okay, you know what, just take as long as you need and just find a way to get those things off the shelf and onto the ground. And so I asked these two actors to just do it. They had no line. They could say whatever they want. They could improvise.
Oh, wow.
And that alone was like 8 minutes of them doing that.
Yeah.
And and as I was filming them do it, I was really like, I was enjoying watching them do it. And I thought, wow, this could be I could watch an 8 minute movie of you guys just taking those things off the shelf. It's so entertaining. But then, but then when you're actually watching it in the context of the film,
Mm-hmm.
I found it's it is tough from just one angle. I mean, in a way, it's just you once your eyes get used to seeing something, it kind of needs to see something else,
Right.
or else it starts to get a little dry. So I did find there were so many times, or the film went through many edits where it would just get shorter and shorter. And anytime I could find a second here or a second there that I could remove, I removed it. And I still probably a little bit am doing that actually. So
Mm.
yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a great lesson for people that, you know, try to cut it down as much as you can, unless you're really trying to go for a moody, slow burning shot or piece or whatever. I think
Mhm.
people's attention spans are so short nowadays that it helps to cut things down as much as you can and really have it flow. Um, you mentioned lines that didn't make it in. I'm curious, what was the script length? Because the short film is around 14, 15 minutes. How long was
Yep.
the script and how did that translate, um, you know, page wise?
Yeah. The script was, I want to say it was 30 pages,
Wow.
which which is actually it's actually kind of dumb because my original thought for the film
Hmm.
was that, oh yeah, this is going to be a 10-minute short. I think it's going to be 10 minutes, right? And
Right.
even now, like, I would almost prefer that it was 10, but I'm also like, I didn't really care how long it was. Like, I just figured if it's entertaining, that's the length,
Hmm.
if an hour would have worked, if I thought it was amazing for an hour, then it would be an hour long film. But in my mind at the time, I thought it should be a 10-minute film. And they say that a script generally works out to about a minute a page, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know what I was thinking writing a 30-page script and thinking it would be 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, but but the thing is, I wrote the story kind of just the way that I thought it would go, and then we kind of just shot it that way. And actually, in a way, I think it kind of helped because what I found, a lot of the things I got cut were, there were some entire scenes that got cut, like just
Mm.
things that we didn't need, but a lot of it was more, rather than use like the whole conversation, I'll grab, that one important line from the conversation.
Hmm.
And so maybe if I just written that line, you know, the actors, we could have just done it, and maybe it would have been a lot faster to shoot as well. But I think in a way it kind of helped because it almost works more realistically, like you're grabbing the middle in the middle of a conversation, because they
Right.
actually are grabbing them from the middle of a conversation. So it worked. But I mean, I don't. It's always the case, I guess. When you look back at the project when you're done, I mean, if there are things that I would have done differently, like that's probably one of the things
Mm.
I would have done. I almost feel bad for the actors because they memorized their lines, like they
Oh,
memorized all their
wow.
lines,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
no one will ever hear them. Yeah, but
But it probably also gave them context for the conversation, which I think was probably really good too.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and you said they were your friends, so whatever. Just kidding.
yeah. I mean, actually, well, the crew are my friends. The cast actually weren't. The
Oh.
cast were the only ones that I had some auditions, and we actually like I actually brought them in and like basically hired them to be my actors.
Oh, gotcha.
But again,
Okay. Yeah, they were
yeah,
great. They were phenomenal. I love
yeah, it was a
the D&D-esque moment where they're playing a game as well, a little fantasy
mhm,
game that they've made up.
yeah, that was my own little. I like playing Warhammer, so that was my
Warhammer.
own little
Okay, yeah, that
addition.
makes more sense because he's measuring the
Mm.
distance. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Hello, we got a couple more viewers. So hello everyone. I just remind you if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I am interviewing Scott Dion Brown about his short film Storage Room B, which is a single angle short film about the zombie apocalypse and some people getting trapped in a storage room. So just recapping for those who just joined.
Hmm.
And you know, we were kind of talking about earlier. We were talking about how the film uses jump cuts, and which I love. And you were saying how it's almost kind of musical. And I totally agree. And it's also interesting because your film is very sparse on music, and the jump cuts
Hmm.
almost act like the music. But can you talk about your decision to let it be mostly sound effects and dialogue? I feel like there's only, I could be wrong, but I feel like I only remember one spot with music.
Yeah. In fact, my original vision for the film was no music,
Mm.
which is usually not a good choice to make, and I guess that's why in the end I didn't make it. But but in my mind, as I was imagining the film, it would just be there would just be so much happening that yeah, the film itself would just roll by.
Mm.
Um, and actually, interestingly, like where I decided to add music was basically kind of the transitional part from like when we're kind of just seeing time go by. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I kind of decided I wrote this little bit of music that has like a clock ticking sound in it, just to kind of
You wrote that
understand
music?
that we're waiting. Yeah, yeah, I
Oh,
composed it
wow.
myself. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, it was fun. But I added it when the film was at a longer length, and I just again just trying to keep it interesting, trying to keep it moving. Um, Part of me wonders like if I keep hacking away at it, would it get to the point where I didn't even need the music anymore? But then again, I kind of now the part feels right with it. Like I'm used to hearing the lines with the music playing. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, the reason it's very light on music is because I wasn't even sure if there necessarily was going to be any, because I did really want it to feel just like you're in the room with these people and there's just things happening,
Yeah.
and then you know, and then the interest would be carried yeah by sound effects and just the intensity of the situation. Um, but then I ended up adding a little bit of music because it seemed to fit.
Yeah, no, totally. It helps. It's like the montage section, and I think it helps
Yeah.
really. It's really great. We have a question in the chat. Lockpicking engineer asks. He says, "I'm a layperson. What is a Dutch angle?" Great question. Sorry we didn't define it before. Scott, do you want to define what a Dutch angle is?
Yeah, the actual definition, it's like it's basically when the camera is like kind of tilted on a diagonal
Mm-hmm.
so that the horizon
Isn't
is not
straight.
straight, and it's usually used if you're trying to show that it's kind of an uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
sort of
Or
situation,
something's
right?
off, something's weird is going on, or the characters are uncomfortable. If you want to know more about Dutch angles, I have a video all about the different shots in films, like the shot angles and shot choices that you can make, and I go into all of those and explain what they are and what they're for as well. So that's a good resource for you if you're looking for that. But yeah, Dutch angles, sometimes they're rarities, like you don't see them very often. And sometimes I'm trying to remember the movie. I saw some movie where it was like every freaking shot is a Dutch angle, and now it's meaningless that every shot is a Dutch angle. So,
I know they it's this is kind of applies in the old Batman 1960s
oh,
Batman. They filmed all of the whenever you saw the scenes with the villains
mm-hmm.
interacting, they always had it crooked, and the idea was because they were the
uh,
crooks.
cause oh yeah,
So
yeah, I love that.
that's why they did it. So
That's
I
great.
guess that applies. That's yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So great question. Thanks for the question.
yeah.
So let's see. Oh, we were talking about the script. I think that this is a great follow up too. Is So how much of your film is scripted and how much is improvisation? Because it looks like you could have done a lot of improv.
Yeah. So the amount that ended up on the screen, I would almost say I'd have to actually go back and look now, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it's very close to like 90+ percent, maybe even more.
Mm.
Um, what I found where you'll see some moments where that were definitely improvised were particularly in the montage scene when they're kind of just waiting around killing time. And at that point, I kind of just said, just be in the room. I was like, things are awkward. You know this person. You're in a room with them now. And then I just sort of let them go. And so there are a couple little moments there where I might grab a moment of them improvising. Um, but in terms of what I did find when I was editing it, and again trying to get it down as short as possible, was I did find that I tried to be super super selective with if it wasn't adding to the story in some way or like pushing things along a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
then or if it wasn't like really funny, like it had to serve some specific purpose. um but anything that was kind of just that's okay but I don't need it,
Mm-hmm.
um it'll go. But so in the final version, yeah, almost all of it was scripted, except for maybe it might not even be lines now. It might just be like the way they there's a couple parts where like they walk or they look at each other or that kind
Mm.
of thing that might have ended up in it. But yeah, so we did use improvisation, and I think it helped, especially them finding their characters and getting to know each other a little bit. But in
Yeah.
terms of what ended up on the actual screen, I think it's quite minimal,
Okay.
actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, did you do a lot of like work with them beforehand, like rehearsals or, to develop a relationship between the two actors?
Um, I wanted to. My original plan was to have a rehearsal with them, but it kind of didn't really work out with
Oh.
anybody's schedule. Everybody was pretty busy. Although what I realized afterwards, actually no, I didn't realize afterwards, but I realized it slightly beforehand, was it might actually be better if the two actors don't know each other anyway,
Right. Because they're not
because at the
supposed to.
beginning of the film they don't know each other, so I almost am fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, using that awkwardness. So that was cool. Um, but then again, there was also the risk, like, because they do get to know each other after a while. And so I kind of got lucky in that they did actually have quite a nice chemistry, which I was very happy with,
Mm-hmm.
which could have gone wrong either way. But um, I was very careful with the audition, though. Like, I had even made the decision, like, so I booked, this, when I finally decided to shoot the film, it was like I held the auditions, and then I think I was planning to start filming. I can't remember if it was a week or two later, and I just sort of had this whole schedule of like how I was going to work up to filming day.
Mm-hmm.
But I made the decision, if I don't find actors that I'm happy with, I was ready to pull the plug on everything.
Oh, wow.
Because yeah, I just wasn't willing to. If I didn't feel like the actors were perfect, then I wasn't going to go, because I feel like it was the most important element. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of pre-rehearsal. I myself did a lot of pre-planning, like just figuring out how I was going to do everything, specifically visual effects and like where people have to be, and so I had an idea of where everybody needs to be. But in terms of working it out with the actors, it was kind of all on the day.
Gotcha. Okay. Nice. Yeah, I think that probably did pay off for the awkwardness. And
Hmm.
you could feel it in a good way.
Yeah, it helped because there was
Yeah.
that. There's that. It's the same thing when you meet anybody you've never met before. Like there's that you're kind of feeling each other out a little bit, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so what are you like? Oh, you're into. Oh, that's neat, cool. Yeah, yeah. It's warm outside.
Yeah.
So because they had a bit of that,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of worked, and it also worked because again the way we had to shoot the film, continuity is a big issue. So we had to
Mm-hmm.
shoot the whole thing in sequence.
Wow.
So it almost worked that the first day is like then they just met each other. Now we're shooting a scene where they've just met each other. And then by the time we got to the end of the first day, everyone was comfortable with each other. And now we're moving into the second day.
Mm.
So it worked. It worked.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the rare luxury of shooting in order.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
um, Captain Fox in the chat wants to know. He's Italian, so he says, "Please forgive his typing skills," but he says, "The way you used an apocalypse zombie backdrop. So I think
Hmm.
maybe like how you use that as a backdrop for the film.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the zombie apocalypse idea, I feel like it's so established now that it's almost just a genre on its own in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like I
Totally.
feel like it's almost the same way as you could be like it's a western or it's a
Mm-hmm.
fantasy film. I feel like the zombie movie is kind of its own thing. So it wasn't necessarily like the concept of one camera angle and the zombie apocalypse thing came to me at the same time. So I didn't intend to do one and then decide to do the other. Like, oh, it'd be fun if I made a zombie movie. It was just I was in the shower and I imagined this scene of these two people hiding from zombies in this room, and it kind of just came together. But the interesting thing with zombies now is you always have to, because it's such an established genre. It's like I feel like there's always that question of, do you set it in a zombie world where people know what zombies are?
Yeah.
Because
Mm-hmm.
like how many times do we have to see like, oh well, if you get bit you become a zombie? Like, do people know that already? So
Mm-hmm.
so I always wonder that. Or like then you always have this problem, like so many of like the zombie movies, like they don't want to call them zombies in the movie, so like they have
Yeah.
other names for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go with the classic, like they they don't know what zombies are, and they don't know if they get bit that they become a zombie. um I think the one thing that, and I don't know how original it is, but the thing that I feel like I kind of played with was a little bit in the film was, what does a zombie do when there are no people around, right? So I
Yeah.
messed around with, yeah. So I messed around with these, like they'll see a person and they're gonna go after you, but then if suddenly they realize they can't get to the person, then it kind of just then they kind of just stand there. That's kind of what I
Mm-hmm.
played with, which it's probably been done before, but it was just something that I had some fun with in the movie.
I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, there's I don't think it's too much of a spoiler, but they like barricade or they close the door and then they open it after a while to see if the zombies are still there, and they're just standing there,
Just there, yeah,
just
yeah,
waiting. Like an NPC or something in
yeah,
a video game. And then they see them and they start to react and they close the door again. And I thought that that was really cool. I don't think I've seen that before in a zombie movie. I think usually like they slowly shuffle away or something. So I thought that was like a
yeah,
really interesting idea and created this conflict for the characters because they're stuck. They just can't leave.
yeah, yeah. That's what I just imagine. I'm not. Yeah, I guess I just the idea is just funny to me that they're
Yeah.
just they're basically pure instinct based. So if
Hmm.
they see something that they want to eat, they go after it. But if there's nothing there, then they just have no motivation to move, so they just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
like that. That was great.
yeah.
Well, moving on to directing questions, just like
Mhm.
general directing questions. And again, I'll just let you all know if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But first off, how important is casting and what do you look for in actors? And you kind of touched on this earlier, saying, I'm not going to make the movie if I don't have the perfect cast. So I'm guessing very important.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's the most important thing. Like if, and I just think now of like, I don't know, the movies that I like the most are the ones that I either enjoyed growing up or even now. Like if I don't like the characters or hate the characters, like depending on how I'm supposed to feel about them. But if they don't connect with the audience in the right way, then none of it matters. Like even if the script is really good, or if the idea is good, or if the concept is good, I feel like awesome likable characters in a lot of ways can almost make up for not that interesting a story if
Mm.
you just really like the characters and want to see what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the casting is, I think it's the most important step. I think you don't really have, if you can have everything else, but if you don't have that, it just it doesn't work. So it was the part that I was by far the most nervous about. And in terms of what I look for, I mean, the actors that I ended up casting, they made it really easy for me. And it was funny because I part of the reason I wanted to make the film was I did want the opportunity to just sit down and direct some actors. Like I wanted the idea, just the experience of just because the first film I made, I starred in it, which I liked doing. Um, but one, it's such a strange thing to direct, and also like you're jumping behind the camera and then you're trying to get into character, and it's
Yeah.
this. It's fine, you do it, but I really wanted to be a director for this film. Um, but then it was also I was expecting, I want to get into the scene and we can talk about, let's find their motivation and find it and ground the scene and all that stuff. But then it was so nice to have actors where I almost didn't have to do much because they kind of got it right away.
Oh, that's cool.
But in term, yeah, it was they were really, I feel really lucky to have worked with them. Haley Midget and Blake Canning are their names. Um, but in terms of what I was looking for, when I wrote the characters, I had like kind of an idea of what they were like in mind, right? But I was also willing to let um and like the actors also sort of find their own voice with it. So I was more looking for certain qualities of a person. So like when I wrote the casting notice, like um it was like open to any ethnicity. It was open to um I had like a fairly wide age range for both.
Oh, wow.
Um I wanted one to be slightly older than the other because the idea is that one character's been working at this place longer.
Mm.
So there was that. But other than that, I wasn't that concerned with any of that. But it was more sort of who could grasp sort of the personalities that I was going for. And and for both of them, it was kind of just as soon as there's just a thing that happens when you see an actor and they start doing the scene.
Mm-hmm.
I remember very specifically when like Haley came in. It's like she did the lines, and I was like, oh there's Jane, you know.
Yeah.
And so that was cool. And Blake was the same. He just sort of understood the character right away. So yeah,
That's
what I'm looking
awesome.
for is characters that actors who can embody the character that I'm looking for, but then also obviously somebody that I feel like I can get along with and work in a fairly pressurized environment for 2 days or however long.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, totally. I actually I forgot to ask, going back to the film, I was gonna ask, did you shoot it during quarantine and what sort of challenges you had if you did?
yeah, we did not shoot during quarantine.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, well, in fact, that's one thing that kind of bugs me about this film is, I mean, I guess everybody has a problem, but it took me so long to get it done, which bothered me. But um, and it's funny because I even remember I've had this concept floating around in my head for years. I'm not even sure how many years, but at this point, it might be 10. Like just when the idea came to me, but it was never a fully fleshed idea. It was more the concept, and so it took me a long time to finally. I need to know the ending before I can sit down and write the script. So
Mm.
it took me a long time to figure out how would I end the film. For me, if I don't have the ending, then I don't have it yet. And so so then we finally sat down and wrote it, and then from the time when I finished the script, or sorry, from the time I decided I was going to finish the script, I was like, we got to get this movie done. So like I said, okay, you must have the script done by this date, you're going to cast on this date, you're going to shoot on this date,
Oh,
right? So
wow.
then there was this short,
Are you a
yeah, so there
producer
was a
too?
short little period. Yeah, oh yeah, I kind of did the steps of it. Yeah, I did everything. But so that was nice, and then I remember we finished shooting it, and I was like, okay, now I'm going to jump in and I'm going to get this thing done. This editing's going to be done in a few months. And then the editing really dragged.
Mm.
I I think it dragged also because um, when I started looking at how much needed to be done and finding the cuts and everything, I think the dauntingness made it like mentally exhausting, and
Mm-hmm.
I found myself procrastinating it. Anyway, so long story short, we shot it before the pandemic, and then the pandemic started, and I was in the middle of editing it, and I was like, oh great, well there's a pandemic, I can't go anywhere. I'm going to finish this film so fast. And then even though I had all this extra time, it was hard for me to really get it done.
Mm.
And it was finally, in fact, what it was the Gen Con Film Festival. I saw the deadline coming up, and
Oh,
yeah, and at that point, I do find for me the way I tend to work is I almost need to create a deadline for myself.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when somebody says to me, "Oh, you can take as long as you need," that's almost like the work. If you don't want to ever see the project finished, that's what you should tell me. Oh, you just take your time with it whenever you get to it, right?
I'm
I'm
the
like,
same
okay, great.
way, for sure.
Yeah, so I almost have to like that's why like the way I got the script done and then the shooting done, I was able to go, you know, okay, well there's a deadline there. Like I made up that deadline, but I because it was there and I wrote it in my calendar, it became the deadline. So anyway, so then it got I was slowly working on it through the pandemic, and then suddenly I saw the deadline for submitting to Gen Con, and I said to myself, I'll be very angry at myself if I miss this deadline and have to wait an entire other year
Mm-hmm.
when I could have just buck. And so because of that, I was finally able to get down and finish it. And then now I've been submitting to basically festivals from that deadline onwards.
Nice. Very
So
cool. Yeah. Yeah, and for I'm the same way where I have to have a deadline or I will just push it off and push it off for sure. And that's why I do a lot of producing work for my own projects, but I also really love when I have a producer to work with who can really help me keep in line with those deadlines because otherwise I'll probably just push them back as well. And I just also wanted to say a shout out to the Gen Con Film Festival. If any of you watching
mhm.
are looking for film festivals to submit to, this one just happened, but I believe they've already opened up for submissions for next year. It's a fantastic film festival, so much fun, and they've gone in person and virtual now moving forward. So there's always a virtual option, which is really fun for people who can't make it out. So that's how we connected through the virtual panels.
That's
Um,
right.
yeah. So okay, so I imagine we're still talking about the film, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be. It can be a broader answer, or we can specify the film. But how do you
Mhm.
approach planning out your film? Do you storyboard or shot list? And I'm very interested actually for Storage Room B because it sounds like maybe you broke it up in half and you did shoot in order. So how did you like plan all that out?
Yeah, so I did have to shoot it in order, just for continuity stuff. In fact, that was the biggest nightmare is that I realized it was a really real nightmare even for doing like multiple takes of a scene. So you
Ooh.
can imagine if somebody, especially if you're doing a scene where something's supposed to happen and then maybe something else happens after it. But let's
Mm-hmm.
say in the process of talking, they like nudge a paper towel roll or they like move something on a shelf. And then I tell them, okay, go back to ones, we're going to do it again. Suddenly that becomes almost like an effects shot because now I've got to go in and mask whatever they moved in the previous take.
Oh,
So it had to be
wow.
shot in sequence. Yeah. That's the other thing that took so long is that almost every shot has some element of
Visual
something
effects.
going on where I had to do something to it
Wow.
almost the entire film. So
Oh, man.
but in terms of how I planned it, there wasn't I mean the script was kind of my shot list in a way
Okay.
because we were going in order. I did storyboard. I mean my storyboards, they're kind of, if anybody else looked at the storyboard they wouldn't know what it is, but I mean
Little
they
stick
were like a
figures.
scribbly, yeah, scribbly like rectangle and like a big circle here is somebody's head, and and a lot of that was just one thing I liked a lot about that I wanted to try to have as much of as the film was sort of like some like I don't know, set up payoff type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like for example, so there's something that gets placed in the bottom corner of the screen, and I like the idea that it gets put there at the very beginning of the film and it comes into play again at the very end, you know.
Oh.
And like I like that, or like if they, if you pick something up later on that's going to be used. So I kind of had to plan like where certain things should be or where this has to end up or if they're going to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there were storyboards that were very, very. They only work for me to look at them,
Gotcha.
but yes,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the important part. You're the one that needs to understand it. So,
yeah.
uh, um, let's see. We have about 13 minutes left. So,
Mhm.
one thing I like to always ask people is, do you have any advice for first time directors that you wish you knew that you could give to them?
Yeah. I mean, well, one thing that I definitely learned on this film that, again, it's always a thing you learn if you when you if I could go back and shoot it again, but then when I realized it's better to just take that knowledge and put it into your next project. But
Mm.
because this was kind of my first time straightforward like directing actors and directing their performance, um, as a director, you need to be aware of what the overall pace and flow of the whole film
Mm.
is. Because the individual actors in a scene, they may not know that. So, for example, like, in fact, they won't know that. So, one thing I noticed is this scene, my film in particular, it's a lot of rapid cuts and a lot of rapid time goes by. And a lot of the flow is created by how one scene flows into the other and like that sort of musical quality to it. But one thing I realized was when, in the scene in the beginning when they first meet each other, and these are just two people, they're having a discussion, maybe they're a little bit scared. So they didn't feel the need to like speak at a fast pace. They kind of just found a grounded performance and they did it, and they kind of did it the way that seemed to work for the how it was in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And what I ended up doing, which I didn't anticipate having to do, was like I thought that the only cuts I would be making would be when a bunch of time has gone by. But I didn't expect that I would be putting cuts like even in the middle of the same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I found I had to do that because it was kind of there was too much space between their lines, which worked in the moment of the scene that they were doing, and they were both
Right.
giving great performances, but it didn't really serve the entire flow, you know. And that was something as I was again directing the individual scene that I was directing, I kind of was, this is a grounded performance. This looks great. Let's just shoot it and film it. But now, looking back, what I've realized is I need to be able to, as a director, you need to know, okay, where does this scene fit in the context of the movie? Is this a fast-paced movie? Then even if this is a serious conversation between, maybe it's two people at a restaurant, maybe there's not a real reason why they should be talking quickly, but
Mm-hmm.
your movie will look way cooler and it flows better if they should, or the opposite. Why are they
Yeah.
talking so fast if you're making this slow going? And so, and it's funny because I was just watching a Star Wars documentary the other day, behind the scenes thing, and like they kept saying how George Lucas, it's like his only direction was like faster and more intense, you know, and like, and they were kind of like making fun of him a little bit for that. But now looking back, I'm like, I could have used some of that. Like that would have
Mm.
been something that if I could have thought, if I could go back and talk to myself who's about to start directing the film, that's one thing I would have said. Be like, because the film in my mind is a rapid moving film.
Right.
And
Right.
but at the time I was directing the actors, I was very much focused on, okay, let's get this scene done. Okay, wow, this is great grounded performance. But I kind of a little bit lost track of the big picture.
Right.
So if it's your first time working with actors, be aware that the actors themselves are going to be looking at the individual scene they're in. They're finding their motivation in this moment. They're not necessarily thinking, oh well, how at the right at the end of the scene you're going to cut to an explosion, so make sure that this leads into it. So as
Right.
a director, you need to keep track of the macro picture as well as the micro, I guess.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. I love that. Well, do you have any upcoming projects that you're working on? Any other films or anything like that?
I'm writing the script now for a it's going to be my plan is going to be a web series.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah. I just think that's the next thing I want to do. I mean, because the thing is, so I did the first film, I was directing myself. And then I was like, okay, great. Now I want to do, then I'm like, I want to direct something where I'm working with actors. I'm like,
Mhm.
great. But the thing that I haven't really done, which I feel like I have to do, is just shoot something that's somewhat normal, as in
Mm,
like more than one camera angle, where you're light, where you move into a location, you block the scene, you set up your lights. Okay, great, we got that angle. Now we're gonna set up the light. You know what I mean? Like do some actual directing of like a regular production. So
yeah.
so that's what I'm writing now, and my plan is for it to be a web series, but I'm still at the point now where I'm kind of not thinking so much episodically as much as I'm kind of just getting the flow of events down, and then we'll see how long it breaks down. But that is what I'm working on now. Yeah, it's going to be a series,
Oh,
um,
nice.
kind of sci-fi, but set in modern times.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's coming down the pipeline.
And people will be able to see that on your YouTube channel?
Yes, probably. I
Probably.
mean, in fact, the answer is yes, definitely. I'm just not sure if that's where it'll be first. Like, I don't know if it depends, because I know
Hmm.
there are a lot of film festivals as well that like accept
Yeah.
series as well and things. So it might go the festival route there. Like even Storage Room B, I think will eventually end up on my YouTube channel once it's done its festival run. But it's got a few more places to go. Actually, yeah, I'm going to be Storage Room B is going to be playing at the what's it called? Shoot, it's one in Orlando, Florida.
Ooh.
Spooky Empire, the Spooky Empire Film
Ooh, that's
Festival.
fun.
Yeah, so that one, and then it's also playing at the Blood and Beer or Beer and Blood Film Festival in Simcoe, Ontario, as well. So those
Oh,
are the
that
two that's
sounds
coming up.
fun. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Super
It's
fun.
gonna be. I think a whole bunch of breweries are involved as well. So there'll be
Oh,
horror
fun.
films and brews.
And
So
beer.
yeah, I'm looking
Oh,
forward to it.
you can't beat that. Are you gonna go to that one?
I think so. Yeah,
Nice.
it's only where it is. It's only about 2 hours outside of Toronto. I'm in Toronto.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I got to hear the details from them because I basically just got the notification that I'm in.
Oh, nice.
But I'll very likely make the trip over there. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we have a couple of minutes left. How about who are some filmmakers that inspire you and influence you? And Flipping Zippo in the chat says Toronto knows their beers.
Yes. Yes. In fact, yeah. Yeah. Toronto's got several good breweries, and yeah. Oh yeah. And Ontario. Yeah. It's the whole province. We got quite a few, but yeah, Toronto's got quite a few craft beers. So I'm excited to go to get some blood and beer. Yes.
Nice.
What was your question again? Oh yeah,
Oh,
influences, right?
yeah. Who are some filmmakers who influence you?
Um, growing up, I was a huge Star Wars fan.
Same.
Um,
Same.
and then also Steven Spielberg was my favorite, like Jurassic Park,
Mm-hmm.
Jaws, E.T. Like those formed my childhood.
Totally.
However, now I think the filmmaker I look to the most is Christopher Nolan.
Mm.
Um, I love his style. I like that his movies they don't feel like they're movies to me. They feel like they're really happening,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
which I mean, I don't thing is when I actually look at the movie kind of objectively, I'm like it obviously is a movie, like it doesn't, but something about the way they build the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm very very a Christopher Nolan fanboy.
That
So,
IMAX, that IMAX film just really sucks you in.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's the thing. He's very much like a film purist. Like he only shoots on actual film,
Mm-hmm.
which is cool. I've never done that, and I'm not sure if I ever will. And I'm not
It's
even
a
sure if I
pain.
necessarily.
I'm gonna be honest. It's
You
a
actually you've
pain.
shot with it before?
I have in film school. I filmed twice with 16 millimeter, and I mean it's fine. It's just like you just don't, you're hoping you get the shot. You don't really know until you go and telecine and color correct and stuff, and you're like, okay, there's now I've seen my film, because it's just
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure nowadays with like we were shooting with an old school Bolex, but like I'm sure nowadays film cameras have, you know, I'm sure they pipe out some sort of monitor so that you can still see what you're shooting. But yeah, it was very much like, okay, look in the viewfinder, the tiny little hole, and hope that what you're
yeah,
seeing is in focus and all that stuff.
yeah. That's the thing. So that's why I don't know if I would ever. I would feel like I would have to have so much disposable money that I
Yeah.
would take on like the added, you know what I mean? Because one thing
Mm-hmm.
I do love about it, how the technology is now, is the are getting so much smaller and so much more compact, which means you can shoot lighter, you can like run and gun a lot easier, and I like
Yeah.
that style.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but anyway, his films themselves, um, I think he's probably my biggest influence right now.
Nice. Awesome. I'm surprised there isn't a horror or zombie director in there.
Yeah, I don't know. No, no. I mean, I like zombie movies.
Yeah.
Um, but no, in terms of style, um, like I would almost like be interested to see like what would Christopher Nolan do with a
With a
zombie movie? How would
yeah,
he make it?
that'd be
You
very
know?
interesting. Or like, I mean, this is completely the other side of the spectrum, but a Wes Anderson zombie movie would be really interesting. Um,
Yeah. Well, yeah. I just think of seeing like I like the idea that a director could, because you have there are like this guy's really known for horror. This guy's really known for this. But I like the idea that like a director could just well he's going to try this and he's going to do one of these and then he's going to do one of these. I
mhm.
like kind of that idea.
The
So
variety. Yeah.
yeah.
Captain Fox says the RE 416 USA uh USAA CMOS sensor does feed to a video to a monitor, so you
Oh,
can. So it looks like the RE film cameras do let you output to a monitor, which is really cool.
cool.
And then Flipping Zippo says, I met a guy who helped invent IMAX. His name was Ian Maxwell. So IMAX. Oh, that's pretty great.
Oh,
Nice.
cool.
Um, well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining me for another Filmmaker Chats and sharing all this cool information about your film. I'm guessing when the film comes out after doing the film festival circuit, people can watch it on your YouTube channel as well. Maybe.
Yeah, that's probably where it's going to end up. Yeah, find me on YouTube. Also on my YouTube channel, there's like behind the scenes vlogs of how we made the movie, so you
Ooh.
can check that out as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
I will definitely check that out. I'm excited for that. And also all the links to Scott's stuff is in the description below, his Instagram, his Twitter, his YouTube channel. So check that out in the description. And thank you guys so much for watching and bringing your own questions to the chat. And again, just as a reminder, if you've ever missed a filmmaker chat before, or you just want to rewatch one, if you support me on Patreon for $10 a month, you get access to all of my filmmaker chat live streams, and you get the basically the archive. And I think there's like 12 of them. There's quite a few. I have ones about film theory. I have ones about tips for submitting to film festivals. And I interview writers and directors and producers and actors. So there's tons of stuff on there and tons of more knowledge. So do go check it out. There's a link in the description below. And thank you, Scott, for joining me on another Filmmaker Chat.
Thank you very much for having me. This was awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will see you guys later. And thanks